Welcome to the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. The Invisible Wheelchair Podcast was selected by FeedSpot as one of the top 10 obsessive-compulsive disorder podcasts. I'm Donald Grodoff, EFT tapping practitioner and OCD coach at FamilyOCD.com. On the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, I focus on the hidden world of OCD and anxiety with interviews and information around this topic. My purpose is to bring about awareness of OCD, those who treat OCD, and of course, those who suffer with OCD. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is a treatable and manageable disorder. In my practice at FamilyOCD.com, I guide people through the process of ERP therapy and other alternative treatments. If you know of someone suffering with OCD, simply visit FamilyOCD.com. If you or someone you know suffers or has suffered and recovered from OCD and would like to get their story out, simply contact us through www.invisiblewheelchair.com. We want to talk to you and get your story out on the podcast. Know that the ideas and thoughts presented here are not necessarily those of Family OCD, Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, or Donald Grodoff. We also ask you to take just a few moments and leave comments at www.invisiblewheelchair.com. Those comments help us to know what the next topic should be, and we really want to hear from you. Now, let's get to that podcast. This podcast was recorded June 5th, 2020. This is podcast number 45, Finding the Right Foods. It's part 4 of Invisible Wheelchair's 4-part series on food and anxiety. Here today with me to talk about the right foods is my friend and associate, Krista Sigmon. Krista is a certified health coach at Carolina's Natural Health Center. So Krista, welcome to the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. I'm so glad you're joining me today.
Thank you, Don, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
In this series, Krista, we've talked about the effects of food, literally the effects of food on the brain and on anxiety. We've talked about the different foods that we really want to avoid. And then we looked deeper actually into processed food. I felt like processed foods was an important one to look at because I don't think people really understand what they are and how bad they are. And now today, what I want to look at is discussing the right foods and how to find them and what to do about them. So that's what I know for yourself. You've done grocery tours, teaching people in a grocery store what to look for, how to find them. One to find out from you is tell us a little bit about how that goes. What do you do in finding the right foods, say in a grocery store?
Sure. Yes. I love talking about this. This makes me so excited. I talk to people about this every day, whether it's on a grocery store tour or here in the office when I sit down with people and try to help them learn what to look for when they shop. So the first thing I like to say is I think that people sometimes make it a little more complicated than it has to be. It's very overwhelming when you're first learning what to look for. But the biggest tip that I teach people is to make sure they're looking at the ingredient list, not the nutrition facts. You can look at that too. The nutrition facts, that's what most people are used to looking at on a label where you see calories and fat and sodium and sugar. And again, that's fine to look at. But what I'm more interested in is the list of ingredients. And that tells you so much about that food. First of all, you want to be buying a lot of foods that don't even have an ingredient list. When you're buying apples and oranges and kale and spinach, those don't have ingredient lists. That's where you really want to be, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But we all are going to buy some foods that are packaged. So you want to look at lists that are very short and very simple and have ingredients that you know and understand. That's my biggest tip. Sometimes you'll hear people say, make sure they have ingredients that you can pronounce. That's fine too, and it's kind of funny. And sometimes you'll see a commercial with little kids trying to pronounce all these crazy ingredients. But I like to go even a step further than that and say ingredients that you know and understand. Would you use those ingredients in your own kitchen? If you would, would you use natural flavors, yeast extract? You can pronounce those. You're not going to use those in your own kitchen. Even fruit juice concentrate, you're not going to use that in your own kitchen. So you want to look for simple ingredients, preferably 5 ingredients or less, just, something that you know and understand. So that's the biggest thing that I teach. Even something that is not necessarily a health food by any means, but like a hot dog, we think that that's a terrible food. But if you look, there are a few brands that are using pretty high quality ingredients. If you're going to give your kid a hot dog occasionally, you can buy hot dogs that have 100% organic grass-fed beef and spices. And that's it. Those are all recognizable ingredients. That's just my biggest tip. And the other thing that we talk a lot about on grocery store tours is in the fruit and vegetable section. Basically, we want people to be eating so many fruits and vegetables, especially vegetables. So trying to branch out, get variety, try things that you haven't tried. So we always go look through, especially the greens section of the grocery store. And we talk about, have you ever tried Swiss chard? Have you ever tried bok choy? Have you ever tried broccoli rabe? There are so many greens that have just tons of nutrients that people are never eating. And so many people are eating the same vegetables all the time. So we definitely focus on branching out, trying new things, and getting lots of variety. And then another thing that we talk about a lot is you always hear shop the perimeter of the grocery store. Some of you may have heard that before, stay out of the aisles where the processed food is. There is some truth to that, but I like to talk about that a little more in depth because around the perimeter of the grocery store is also the bakery, the deli, the dairy. I talk about there are some good things in the aisles too. In the aisles, you can find whole grains, good quality oils, legumes, stuff like that. So I don't think the aisles are off limit. It's just kind of learning what's good on the perimeter, what's good in the aisles. Another thing that I like to talk about, just organic labeling in general. So a lot of people will ask me, do I have to buy everything organic? No, definitely not. There are some things that I feel are way more important to buy organic. First of all, there's a list that the Environmental Working Group puts out every year. You can go to EWG.org and search for the Dirty Dozen list. And so this list is top 12 fruits and vegetables that have the most pesticide residue. And then they also have the Clean 15 list, which is the 15 fruits and vegetables that have the least pesticide residue. So that's a really important list when you're trying to decide when it's important to buy organic and when it's not. For the Dirty Dozen, it's really important to try and buy organic if you can. Those things are not always available. So, we don't want people to stress out over it, but try to buy organic if it's available and affordable. Sometimes there's a big difference in the price of organic versus conventionally raised, and sometimes it's a pretty, small difference. Just a few of the Dirty Dozen, just so people kind of know, they happen to be a lot of the most common fruits and vegetables. That's the unfortunate part, but like apples, strawberries, grape, potatoes, tomatoes, peaches, those are a few. Those you really want to try to buy organic if possible. And then another thing about organic labeling for packaged foods, there are a lot of organic packaged foods these days. So just because something is organic, obviously doesn't mean it's healthy. You can buy organic cookies, right? And that's still not a health food, but there are some advantages to buying organic chips or cookies. They're definitely going to have stricter standards on no genetically modified ingredients. They're not going to allow artificial sweeteners, artificial colors. Like there are certain ingredients that are not allowed. So that's definitely going to be a step up. But again, it doesn't make it a health food by any means. So just sort of be aware of that kind of marketing. And it sort of tricks people into thinking that it's healthier when it's not necessarily. And then speaking of trickery, another great marketing trick that we talk about on grocery store tours, don't believe the claims on the front of the label. you're going to see, made with whole grains, trans fat free, a million other ones. Again, it goes back to the ingredient list. You want to trust the ingredient list and not the claims on the front, because that's all just marketing. And they're trying to grab your attention, and it worked. Don't let them trick you. So yeah, those are probably my top tips for grocery store tours. As far as where to buy these foods too, that's a really big question that people ask, and like, where do I go on grocery store tours? And people ask me this every day, where should I shop? And I say, shop where you want to shop. You can find good quality food most every grocery store. You have to weed out a little bit more at certain grocery stores. It's harder to find them, but they're usually there. So it just depends on what is close to you, where you enjoy shopping. I do not say that you have to shop at a health food store. There are plenty of foods in a health food store that are not healthy either. You still have to dig through, but you have probably some healthier options there. So I tell people, if you can, go to Whole Foods or another health food store like Whole Foods for some things. Pick up some, specialty things that they might not have at your regular grocery store. For the most part, you can find what you need anywhere. And the great news is more and more things are available at every grocery store. You can find great options at discount stores like Walmart and Aldi and Lidl and Target. You can find it anywhere if you know what to look for.
That kind of leads me off into a question we haven't talked about, but the idea of local versus not. In other words, like the other day I got grapefruits and I was eating a grapefruit, and I noticed on the label that was stuck on the grapefruit, it said product of Israel. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
So maybe just talk a little bit about going to your local farmers market and what to look for there. Is that?
Sure. That is an awesome question. I love this question. So there's not really a right or wrong answer to local versus organic, but I'll kind of give you some of my tips. First of all, if you buy local at, say, your local farmers market or a local farmer stand or something like that, you're buying food that is in season, and usually it's the freshest, because at a farmer's market, they usually pick the produce the day before or a couple of days before. Produce loses nutrients every day after it's picked. If you're buying lettuce, for instance, at the grocery store, maybe it's organic romaine, but it may have been grown in California and shipped all the way across the country. It was probably picked a couple of weeks ago. It's lost a lot of nutrients. So it's not as nutritious, and it just doesn't taste as good. When you have fresh lettuce that was picked the day before from the farmer's market, you can't beat the taste. So that's one advantage. And a lot of times local farmers are growing their food or using organic practices. They just may not be certified organic. The reason that is because they're small farms, and being certified is expensive, and there's all kinds of red tape. So a lot of times they just don't go through the hassle of doing it, but they're still, again, using organic practices. So the best thing to do is get to know your local farmers. We have a great farmers market here in Matthews, North Carolina, and all of the vendors at this market have to be within 50 miles of our town. So they're all truly local, because some farmers markets have produce from all over the world. They're not necessarily local just because it's a farmer's market, but our farmer's market, they have to be local. And the farmer has to be the person there selling the food. So you can actually talk to the farmer. You're not just talking to someone that they hired to man their table. So you just ask them questions, ask them about their growing practices, and do they use pesticides and chemicals, and they'll be really honest with you. They're proud of what they do, and they want to explain to you what they do. And I always tell people, if you ask that question and someone acts offended, then you don't want to buy from them. If they're doing the right thing, they're proud of it, and they want to share with you. So I prefer, for the most part, buying local if I know the farmer can talk to the farmer and kind of know how they grow the food. Buying your organic produce from the grocery store is great too. Again, with everything we're talking about, there's not a right or wrong answer. You want to do the best you can and make better choices whenever you can.
Well, and that leads me to the next question is, what would you suggest for somebody that is dealing with a tight budget that still wants to try to do their, like you said, try to do their best? What kind of tips would you give them? Like even with organic, I think you kind of touched upon it there. about the organic part. What other tips would you want to give them about how to stay on a budget but still try to get the right food?
Sure. I love this one too. I love your questions. There's so
Well,
many.
thank you.
You're welcome. There's so many budget tips. So yes, we touched on the dirty dozen earlier. Again, that's a great tip as far as when you need to buy organic versus when it's not as important, so that you're not buying organic for every single fruit and vegetable. You're going to save some money there. So buying frozen can be a great money saver. So another great way to save money is to use frozen fruits and vegetables. Sometimes they're usually less expensive and they're very nutritious. A lot of people ask me, is it okay to use frozen? And yes, they are frozen right after they're picked. So it goes back to the thing we were talking about with local. The nutrients haven't been lost because the freezing process locks in the nutrients. So a lot of times frozen can be even more nutritious than fresh. You know, I prefer the taste of fresh vegetables better, but I always keep a stock of frozen vegetables in case just don't have any fresh on hand. But I do love frozen fruit and frozen berries, any frozen fruit. You can save so much money by buying frozen, especially if you shop at a warehouse store like a Costco or a Sam's or BJ's. You can buy, big bags of organic berries for a fraction of what it would cost to buy them fresh. And then you don't have any waste as well. And, if you buy fresh berries, we know they go bad in just a few days. So you don't want to waste. Which leads me to my next tip: don't waste. The most expensive thing you can do is buy organic fruits or buy organic foods and throw them away. That is expensive. So you do not want to waste your good quality food. So I make every effort I can not to throw away anything. I have some great tips for not wasting. First of all, don't overbuy. That's kind of a basic one. Really try to buy what you're going to be able to use. But we all overbuy sometimes. Life gets in the way. You think you're going to cook more than you do. Plenty of things can be frozen. So if you buy fresh berries and they're starting to go bad, give them a rinse, stick them in the freezer, use them in smoothies. You can do the same thing with so many things for smoothies. If you guys are doing smoothies, great way to use up your fruits and vegetables. Spinach, you have a container of spinach, starts to go bad. You find a couple of slimy leaves in there, get those out, stick it in the freezer, and you can just grab a handful, put it in your smoothie. You cut an avocado, you eat a half of it, and the other half's starting to brown a little bit. You're not going to finish it. Scoop it out of the skin, stick it in a little Ziploc bag, stick it in the freezer, put it in a smoothie. Your apples start to get a little bit wrinkly, and they're not so crisp anymore. Same thing, wash. Quarter, freezer, put them in a smoothie. So I use that for so many things. Another great way to use up stuff so you don't waste is just to make a vegetable soup or a vegetable stir fry or a curry. And the other night I made a vegetable curry and I used up so many things from my fridge. I had some wilted kale that wasn't looking, ideal anymore. Chop that up, put that in there. I had like a little quarter of an onion that I hadn't used. I put that in there. I had some scallions that I put in there. I had a half of a bell pepper I put in there. So I basically cleaned out my produce store and made an awesome dinner. So you can do that with, again, a vegetable soup, a stir fry. So from time to time, just do a clean out and use anything that you have that's, not looking its best. Or you can use something that's fresh as well. And if you have something that gets a little bit wilty, like celery or carrots or even lettuce, you can refresh it by soaking it in a big bowl of ice water for 10 minutes or so and rinsing well, and a lot of things will sort of crisp back up. That's another great tip. So just definitely do not waste and do not throw out food. That's super expensive. Another great way to save money when you're trying to eat healthier and eat organic is to eat less meat. Definitely good quality meat is very expensive, and we haven't really talked about meat yet, which I'll touch on that right now. But the best meat that you can buy, the best quality, is from a local farmer, from, again, a farmer's market, or just a farmer that there are local farms in most areas now that you can buy the meat directly from them. Sometimes they deliver, or again, they might sell at a local farmer's market, but then you're buying meat that comes from animals that were raised the way they were meant to be raised, on a pasture. So for chicken and pork, you want to look for pastured chicken and pork. And that basically just means they're out in the pasture. For chickens, they're eating worms and bugs, their natural diet, they're in the sunshine, they're healthy. We want to eat meat from animals that are not sick. And when animals are raised on a factory farm, they're usually some pretty bad conditions. I won't go into the detail here. If you want to know more, Google it. It's pretty disturbing, but they can be, just bad conditions, mistreated, lots of hormones and antibiotics, bad feed, and all of that kind of stuff. So I definitely recommend the best quality meat that you can afford and have access to. So even if you buy better meat, sometimes that's great. That's a step in the right direction. None of these diet changes need to be 100%. You don't have to change everything. Just start making some little changes one at a time. That's the best thing you can do. Back to the meat. So that's the best option. Next option, if you're buying in a grocery store, try to buy, organic chicken. Look for grass-fed beef. So for beef, you don't want to buy beef that's from cows that were raised on pasture again, and they're fed grass. Grass is their natural diet, so they're going to be healthier animal. Cows are not meant to eat grains, and that's what they're fed when they're in on a factory farm. So they're not as healthy. So again, grass-fed beef, pretty easy to find in most grocery stores these days, but it's more expensive. It's all more expensive. So I tell people, eat smaller portions of meat, stretch it. Put some chicken in a stir fry and you can stretch one chicken breast for your whole family if you load it up with a lot of vegetables. So definitely eat smaller portions and eat it less often. Have more meatless meals. You do not have to have meat at every meal. That is a misconception. You can do meals with legumes and whole grains and very inexpensive. You can even stretch your meat with beans. You can, if you're browning ground beef for tacos, when I make tacos, I'll do a can of black beans or kidney beans, or if I have some cooked lentils, I'll add that to the beef. So it just stretches the beef, and less beef feeds more people, and then you have additional, healthy legumes in there. Or you can do the same thing with mushrooms. You can finely chop a package of mushrooms and add that to your ground beef for spaghetti sauce or chili or tacos. And then my kids don't even notice there are mushrooms in there. And so again, they're getting less meat, more vegetables, and it's cheaper. Another great tip in general to save money if you're on more of a budget is just to cook more food at home. If you're cooking your own food, you're going to save money. You can make inexpensive meals, especially if you're making meatless meals, for way less than it costs even for the cheapest food, takeout food. Even fast food for a family of 4 can be more expensive than a simple home cooked meal. So definitely cook at home more for your budget, but also for your health. So again, one of the best things you can do to change your diet and to eat healthier is to control the quality of the ingredients and you prepare your own food. When we are relying on other people to make our food, whether it's packaged food, takeout food, eating in restaurants, they're going to use the cheapest ingredients that they can because they're trying to make money. Now, again, there are some companies and some restaurants that are doing the right thing and use really high quality. There are some of those out there, but for the most part, you're going to have very highly processed, inflammatory oils, excess salt, excess sugar, lots of additives in, again, packaged food, takeout food, restaurant food, any of that. And again, not saying you should never do that. We all have to live our life and we all have, limited time and everyone's busy. But if you really, truly want to change your health, you need to be controlling the quality of your food and making most of it at home. So you're saving money and you're saving your health. So learn to cook. I tell people who tell me they don't know how to cook or they don't like it, learn how. It's a mindset. Tell yourself it's fun. Turn on some music. pour a glass of sparkling water or wine or whatever works for you. Have a good sharp knife and a nice cutting board. That makes all the difference in the world. And just tell yourself this is relaxing and fun. And you'll eventually learn to believe it if you keep telling yourself. So get in the kitchen. Super, super important.
A lot of great tips there for us. That's wonderful. What I want to wrap it up with is just kind of give my audience an idea of how you got into it. Why did you get into this?
Sure. I would say my whole life I ate fairly healthy. I mean, of course, I had the standard American diet when I was a kid at some times, like everybody else. We had fast food and frozen pizzas and all that from time to time, but my mom did cook home cooked meals most of the time, and my parents owned produce markets growing up, so we always had tons of fresh fruits and vegetables. So that was one great advantage I had as a kid. I was familiar with eating fresh vegetables, fruits all the time. So I think as I got a little bit older and got out of college, I became more interested in it and started learning more about healthy eating and started learning to cook, and just really always loved to cook from the time I started learning. Then I had kids, which got me even more interested in health and nutrition, and wanted to make sure I raised them, learning to really like healthy foods and having a really good palate, which they do. They're very good eaters now. They're grown now. But anyway, once my kids got a little bit older, I was ready to go back to work. So I was a stay-at-home mom with them for a while, and I was sort of ready to go back to work, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something that was meaningful to me and something I was passionate about, and just started doing a little research about what I could do to learn more about health and nutrition, how I could make a career out of it. And I stumbled upon the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. So it's the largest nutrition school in the world. It's an online course. And I did that. It was fantastic. I loved it. And I got my certification as a health coach. And started practicing. I worked on my own from home for a few years, and then got this fantastic opportunity to work here at Carolina's Natural Health Center with Dr. Smith. And it's been an awesome, awesome journey.
Well, Krista, it has been a lot of fun to chat with you and go over these details, because this is to me very important. Food is medicine. What we put in our body fuels our body, and if we're not fueling it right, it can be a lot of trouble. And so these tips and these ideas to me are priceless. And so I thank you for being part of the show today. And again, like I say, just glad you were here.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it. I love talking about this.
This concludes this podcast. We really would appreciate your comments. Simply leave a comment at www.invisiblewheelchair.com. There, you're able to submit a comment that will help us determine future podcasts. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the podcast, please email don@invisiblewheelchair.com. Remember, there is a corresponding tapping recording for each of the podcasts, with the exception of the interview podcast. You can find these tapping recordings and archive past podcasts at www.invisiblewheelchair.com. Finally, there is relief for OCD, and we at FamilyOCD.com and FocusedHealthyFamily.com can help you find that relief. Again, you can contact us through those sites, FamilyOCD.com or FocusedHealthyFamily.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at InvisibleWheel1, that's the number 1, or at FamilyOCD. So thank you for listening. Keep tapping and transcending your life to new heights.